Hello, I'm Liam Turner, the digital editor at CIH. As part of the 2026 vice presidential election, I've been speaking with the hopeful candidates to find out a bit more about them, their background, and why they want to become the next vice president and ultimately president of CIH. In this video, I sit down with Nic Bliss, a prominent and experienced tenant advocate and campaign director at Stop Social Housing Stigma, which is a tenant-led organisation committed to fighting negative stereotypes against social housing residents. As Nic explained in our conversation, he has an unconventional journey through housing, but one that he feels has given him invaluable insight and experience. Here's what Nic had to say. Okay, first question I've got for you then, Nic, is so why have you decided to stand for the CIH vice presidency at this moment? Why now?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and I think it is quite pertinent that it is now. So most people, or some people, will know me as the campaign director for the Stop Social Housing Stigma campaign, which obviously is very much a campaign that's to do with the culture of the social housing sector and how that's developing. Um, some people will know that we did a recent survey in the campaign that showed that 70% of tenants feel stigmatised and that 54% feel stigmatised because of something that their landlord has done, which I think most people would agree are pretty shocking statistics and mean that perhaps there's some action to be taken. So for me, I think the key issue is that there needs to be a sort of cultural debate within the sector. And obviously it's particularly critical, I think, in terms of CIH at the minute, because the CIH is obviously very central to the issues of conduct and competency that are being raised in the regulatory standards. And I think that whatever we're talking about, whilst the professional qualifications are really important, there's something more to it than that for us. It's about how do we get people across the sector talking about these critical cultural issues. I think that there is debate going on at the minute. I don't think, and I think there's some fantastic staff out there who are leading that debate and obviously working with tenants to do so. But I think, this needs to be amplified because I don't think it's universal across the sector, and I think it needs change. And I think this is about responding directly to what tenants need and want, and it's quite important in terms of how they perceive the services that they receive.
Yep. No, absolutely. I was just wondering as well if you could tell me a little bit about your kind of journey into housing and kind of what first kind of
Sure,
inspired
sure.
you to get
Yeah.
involved in the sector.
I think probably with most of this interview, it's probably going to be somewhat unconventional. So my journey into housing is not conventional. I started out back in 1987 when I became a tenant of a registered provider housing cooperative in Birmingham. And way back then, I kind of was kind of sort of just amazed by how ordinary people could have that level of power over their sort of local circumstances.
Yeah.
And I kind of started to think, actually, this is something that other people should have, and should be able to have their say on something that's quite a fundamental part of their life, their homes, So I started, naively in those days, I thought it was just a case of you go to Parliament and say, yay, look at this. But it's, some 40 odd years later, I'm still doing it. But that then led to me starting to work with tenants and landlords in a variety of different contexts of, to do with sort of obviously more tenant related things and how to, tenants and landlords could work together. I became a sort of initially as a volunteer, a central person with the Confederation of Cooperative Housing, who were who are the national body that represents community-led housing, and subsequently became its head of policy, for which I was there for some years. I was also in that context. I worked with various other national organisations, including TPAS, for example, as what were called the national tenant organisations in those days, which was very much working in partnership with government and others. The CIH certainly were partners to us then. Trying to sort of make to make it so tenant voices were heard in government. I was one of the pioneer people who sort of set up the first national tenant voice, and was on its board at that point. Unfortunately, that didn't survive, but that's another story. And then in terms of I mean, I got to a point where I wanted to retire from the CCH because I've been doing it for so long. So I stepped down. I'm still doing various work with tenants and landlords on various things, and have been all along. And then the tenants from the Stop Social Housing Stigma campaign contacted me and asked me to sort of work with them, which was, I kind of missed, although I was sort of heading towards retirement, I kind of missed the national stuff that I've been doing before. And these were a fantastic group of tenants. And I thought, yeah, I think that, and it's, there's a big need to do it. And so I thought, yeah, I'll do that. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now. I think that's giving you the rough sort of gist of how I've got to where I am.
Yeah, no, very comprehensive. Yeah. Just wondered as well. So you're talking about, kind of, you've been involved in the sector in kind of various ways for quite a long time. What would you say has been your proudest moment to date?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them. There's a lot of things that have come along that I'm pretty proud of. So I was for example, I was the main person who developed the community gateway model, which led to the development of a number of sort of tenant-led sort of housing associations, and I worked with setting those up. As I said, I was involved with setting up the National Tenant Voice, which unfortunately became subject to the bonfire of the Quangos in 2010. But I think that the way that we had set it up was actually quite strong. There was a good piece of work done there. I was involved with supporting the ministry on setting up their ministerial tenant roadshows post Grenfell, which was quite important in terms of sort of getting tenants' voices heard at that time. I was quite proud of that work. I've worked with, as I say, many small and large landlords on sort of and their tenants, and working on things, and I'm proud of all those things. And obviously, I'm quite proud, well, a lot proud of the Tackling Stigma Journey Planner that we've worked on last year. But actually, in terms of answering your question, is I think what I am most proud of, I've sort of been giving some thoughts to this over the couple of days, is probably the more quiet things, actually, where actually I've worked with tenants and facilitated them to achieve things. And often tenants who really don't necessarily know that they have the skills that they have, and bringing those skills to the fore and enabling them to change things and to see that they can have some power, I think is really, that to me is what fills me with the most pride, is watching that journey that some tenants have made.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. And obviously, if you do become the next CIH vice president and eventually president, there will be obviously quite significant roles within CIH. So just wondered what CIH means to you.
Well, I mean, the CIH, I've talked about my journey, but the CIH has always been there. You know what I mean? It's always been a partner to us. Again, I mean, my relationship with CIH is not conventional. So, I haven't gone down the professional qualifications route, because to a certain extent, the kind of work that I've done, I've had to almost like make it up as I go along anyway, because it's all sort of it's all unconventional and so on. But, I recognise the CIH as being, it's an important body in terms of shaping sort of professional qualifications, and also alongside that, the culture of the staff working in the sector. I've talked already about, the negative statistics in terms of sort of stigma and so on that tenants are feeling and so on. But I think that, what we've seen is that there are a lot of staff who actually share the views that tenants have on this and want to see change themselves. And I think it's, an important part of, the CIH's relationship with its members, is that it needs to enable staff right across the sector to really help to shape that ongoing debate. And I mean, the reality is that is going to be an ongoing debate.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my first kind of engagement with CIH was probably back in the days of Sarah Webb. Probably, I don't imagine you were around in those days, but Sarah Webb was. I mean, she was a hugely influential person, and she was, very inspirational, and I can't think, made a lot of changes at that time in the sector. And then I worked certainly with Terry Alifat and
Yeah.
subsequently Gavin, and I think whenever we've been working on things, we've turned to the CIH as partners, and I think because of the cultural role that CIH plays, I think the CIH have been willing to be partners. And so actually, in terms of the Stop Social Housing Stigma campaign, the CIH played a very much a facilitatory role to help make the Stop Social Housing Stigma campaign develop as it has done. So I mean, obviously that's an important part of our my perceptions of the CIH. Again, not conventional, but still important.
Yeah. And well, I think I might know the answer to this next question, but
Yeah, yeah.
but what one issue in housing do you think isn't getting enough attention or as much attention as it
Yeah.
perhaps should?
Well, I mean, yeah, you do know the answer to the because to me it is this cultural issue. It is the issue of the behaviours and attitudes in the sector and so on. So I don't, one of the things that our tenant survey showed us actually is there are positive examples as well. So there are good, there's good examples and so on, and there is good debate going on in the sector. I think, whatever I want to do is about amplifying that and trying to sustain it because, it's something that will need to change over
Yeah.
time. And I think, one of the issues that we've been having dialogue with the regulator about, they're introducing the terms, with the conduct and
Yeah.
competency thing of referring to appropriate behaviours.
Hmm.
And I think one of the things that I'm keen to sort of explore is what does that actually mean? What does appropriate behaviours mean? Now, I'm not saying I want to be prescriptive about that, but I think that is a debate that needs to be had. And if I can just end by sort of just referring to the fact that I recently, as you know, I've had a routine medical procedure done in our wonderful National Health Service. And the kind of professionalism that I encountered there in every member of the team was exceptional. But it wasn't just the professionalism that they knew what they were doing and the service was really good. It was also that their empathetic approach to it and
Hmm.
that I was made to feel comfortable every step of the way. Now, I think there are staff in the social housing sector who do that, and really good members of staff. But I don't think it's universal. And I think,
Yeah.
with the National Health Service, they have kind of defined the behaviours they expect to see. Although I think probably their staff, by and large, don't need it because they're so committed that they do it anyway. And so I think to a certain extent, I think there's more work that we can do in the sector, working together across the sector, enabling everybody to shape it. There's more work that can be done to say what are the appropriate behaviours that lead to the culture that we all want to see happening in the social housing sector. And so, that to me is what I want to be trumpeting.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I was going to ask if there was if you had any kind of final thoughts that you wanted to leave viewers with, but I guess that might have been
I think that was it. I saw that you said that, but I knew what I was going to say, and I think I
Yeah.
was going to. I think I've covered it in all the other questions. So there you go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, it's been great chatting with you
Yeah,
Nick. And yeah, best of luck with your campaign.
yeah. No worries. Yeah, brilliant. Nice to
Thank,
speak to you. All right.
thank
Bye
you.
bye.